Welcome to a presentation on the skeletal system. We'll be having a look at the functions of bones, cartilage, ligaments and tendons, and then we'll also be having a look at the bones of the axial and appendicular skeleton, and also looking at the names of bones. So first of all, the functions of bones. So the main function of bones is to provide support. So they sort of act like a frame in a house, and they provide structural support for the body. So if we didn't actually have a skeleton, you could imagine what our bodies would look like. They'd end up just being a lump of jelly on the ground, and we wouldn't be able to move either because the muscles rely on bones to lever against. So we'd have no movement. So we need bones to provide that support, and we also need them for our muscles to move. Bones will also provide protection. So if you think about the cases where you've got, say, the skull protecting the brain. So the brain is a very valuable organ and it can get damaged quite easily. And if it is damaged, the way we function is affected greatly. So by some miraculous design, the brain is protected quite heavily with the skull. Another example could be your rib cage. So it protects the lungs inside, and also the liver and the esophagus are tucked up in there as well. Another function of bones is storage. So for example, the bones can store great deposits of minerals such as phosphorus and calcium. And although bones need calcium to actually calcify or get harder, they just simply store the calcium for things such as muscular contraction as well. And then last but not least is blood cell formation or hematopiosis. So that really only occurs in the long bones, such as the legs and the arms. There's just simply not enough room in bones, such as the little ones in your fingers, for that process to actually occur. Alright, so next is cartilage. So cartilage is a fibrous tissue and it sort of acts like a cushion in joints, and it's fairly flexible. So the main one is called hyaline cartilage, and it gets its name from the word hyaline, which means glass. So the cartilage that is surrounding the ends of the bones has like a bluish clear appearance, a bit like glass, hence the name. And you can find it in other locations apart from just covering the ends of bones. It's found in the voice box or the larynx. That area needs to be quite flexible for your voice to actually have different pitches and sounds. And it's also found where the ribs attach to the breastbone or the sternum. So in order for your lungs to actually expand, the ribs need to be flexible. So if they were 100% bone, they would not be able to expand like they do when you take a big deep breath in. If you had if you had ribs that were made of 100% bone, it would feel like there was an elephant sitting on top of you and you wouldn't be able to breathe. It's simply because the lungs need to get bigger to allow the air to come in. And if they couldn't, it would be like you were limiting the amount of breath that was allowed in. Another type of cartilage is elastic cartilage. So if you play around with the outer part of your ear for a little bit, you'll notice that it bends back and forth and twists and turns, and it never actually breaks, and it also flips back into place as soon as you let go of it. So that means that the cartilage is very handy for flexibility, where you don't really need joints and you don't really need muscles. You just need something to provide structure. And also there's another type of cartilage, and that's fibrocartilage. Now that forms the discs between the vertebrae. So the vertebrae are the flat round pieces of bone that make up your spinal column, and this sort of cartilage acts like a cushion. So for example, when you jump up and down, you've got quite a lot of impact, and you don't want your vertebrae to be smashing up against each other, so you've got some padding in between. So it's a little bit like an Oreo cookie, where you've got the two round discs of cookie, and that could be like the vertebrae, and then you've got the mushy soft cream in between, and that's the fibrocartilage. Okay, so tendons and ligaments. There's not a lot that you need to know about these. The main thing that you need to know is the difference. So we'll look at tendons first. So tendons are basically the types of tissue that attach muscles to bone. If you look at the picture on the right, you'll see that there's a big stretch of red muscle belly that's on the arm bones, and on the ends of those red pieces are little whitish areas. So that's the actual tendon. So the tendon allows the muscle to attach to the bone completely, and if a muscle was to snap off the bone, the tendon is probably what will break. And ligaments are similar to tendons, but there's just no muscle involved. So ligaments are useful in regions where you just need a lot more support. So for example, joints. So your wrist can move because you've got flexors in your forearm, but you don't want all those bones to come apart. So you need to wrap them up in ligaments to keep them all in place. A really good example of ligaments that has an impact when playing sport is the ACL, which is what footballers will often break if they twist their knee to a different side or the wrong side. So the ACL is the anterior cruciate ligament, and it's a little piece of ligament that sits inside the knee joint. And if it snaps, the knee has all of a sudden lost a lot of structural support. So that's why footballers are out for such a long time when they damage an ACL, because when you damage something that provides support for the body, it takes a lot longer to repair. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the bones now, or the names of bones. So I'll quickly run through each of the names, and then you can have a go at remembering them yourself. Alright, so we've got the cranium, which is otherwise known as the skull, the mandible, which is the jaw, the clavicle, which is the collarbone, the sternum, which is the breastbone, the humerus, which is the upper arm bone. Now, the humerus is linked to that term, the funny bone. So the funny bone is that section of your elbow that you hit and it really, really hurts. And it's not funny at all, but it's called the funny bone because it's linked to that word humerus. Now, just bear in mind the word humerus that actually means funny it has an O in it as well. The arm bone humerus does not have an O in it. Okay, ribs. So you can notice there that there's quite a lot of bluish white area on the ribs. Now that's what I was talking before about the hyaline cartilage. So they make up the majority of the ribs. Like there's not a lot of bone in there. So the bluish white is the cartilage, and then that sort of wraps around to join up with the ribs. All right, the ulna, which is the bone in the forearm that runs along the side of the little finger. And the way I remember that is it's got an L in it, an L for little finger. And then the other bone on the other side, or the one that runs up the side of your thumb, is the radius. And now you've got 3 sets of bones in your hands, and you've got 3 sets of bones in your feet, which we'll get to later on. So the bones in your wrist, or the lower part of your hand, are the carpals. The bones that make up the palm of your hand are the metacarpals, and then the bones that make up your fingers are the phalanges. Your main upper, or your only upper leg bone is the femur, and that's the one that I was talking about with the hematopiosis, or the blood cell formation. And you've got your patella, which is your kneecap. Now that just sits on top of your leg bones, and it's strapped in by those ligaments I was talking about earlier. Then you've got the tibia. So the tibia is the front bone in your lower leg, and that's the one that you can feel when you run your hands up and down the front, and it's otherwise known as your shin bone. And at the back is a much thinner bone, and that's the fibula. So again, I remember this little bone by the L. So L for little, L for fibula. And tibia and fibula are 2 bones that are commonly mixed up, so just be aware of that. So to the feet, like I said, there's 3 sets of bones here as well. There's the tarsals that sort of make up your ankle region. the metatarsals, which make up the bed of your foot, and then the phalanges, which make up your toes. So you'll notice there's phalanges twice, so phalanges make up your fingers and toes. Alright, so looking at the back of the skeleton, there were some bones we missed just because I couldn't fit them in, or they display better on the back. So the scapula, or your chicken wings, or your shoulder blades. So they're the ones that you can feel when you poke your fingers around the upper sections of your back. Your pelvis, or your pelvic girdle, or basically your hips. And that encases a lot of your reproductive organs and your lower intestines. And the calcaneum, which is your heel, so that really, really hard bony part is the calcaneum. So we'll quickly look at the spine, but then go into more detail. So the first set of vertebrae there is cervical vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae in the upper back, lumbar vertebrae in the lower back, the sacrum, and the coccyx. So looking at that in more detail, you'll notice that it's divided up into sections. So the cervical vertebrae are C1 to C7. Now the first two vertebrae, C1 and C2, the atlas and the axis, are the two vertebrae that allow the head to nod up and down and shake from left to right, so to say no. And they're quite pivotal in that if you didn't have those vertebrae for the skull to sit on, you wouldn't be able to make any head gestures at all. Okay, so then you've got the T1 to T12 vertebrae, or the thoracic vertebrae, and that's in your upper back. And these are quite important in that they make up the majority of your spine, and these are the ones you have to look after when you sleep in particular. So, you know, a good mattress will help you avoid any curvature from left to right in these vertebrae. So you'll notice in the whole spine there is a natural curve anyway, but you want to keep it very, very still when you sleep. All right, the lumbar vertebrae, which there's only 5 of them, but they are crucial in when you are using your lower back to do activities. For example, when you're lifting, so if you lift and then you turn at the same time, your lumbar vertebrae are usually the ones that are going to be involved in some sort of muscle strain or injury, because your lower back is taking all the weight of what your activity will be. Okay, so the next section is the sacrum. So that's also got vertebrae in it, but they're what we call fused. So fused means joined together. So they don't actually have any number labels on them because they're not separate vertebrae. They're all joined together. And then the last area there is the coccyx, which is also some joined vertebrae or some fused vertebrae. And the coccyx is sort of the remnants of the tailbone. Now, if you had a look at dogs and cats, they would have something a little bit different, and they would have a much longer tailbone than us. And the coccyx is also that little bone that if your friend is silly enough to pull out your chair on you and you fall flat on the ground onto your bottom, your coccyx is the one that breaks. And if it does break, you're in for a very painful recovery, and you have to sit on a ring pillow for quite a few weeks. All right, so now it's your turn. What I'd like you to do is have a go at memorizing those bones. Rewind the video if you need to. I did go through them fairly quickly, and then I'll give you a chance to test yourself. All right, so what I want you to do in a moment is pause the video and write down as many names of the bones as you can. All right, so pause now. Okay, so these are the answers for you. I hope you got most of them right. If you didn't, use this time to review and see what you got wrong. We're going to do the same thing with the back of the skeleton. So now, again, pause the video and have a go at writing down the names of the bones that you see there. Okay, and the answers for you again. I hope you got those ones right too. And last but not least, I'll give you the chance to try and recall the names of the spinal column. So pause now. And here are the answers for you. So that concludes the presentation on the skeletal system. If you have any questions, please make sure you ask me or send me an email.